Hi, I'm Nicholas McGurr, author of The Afterlife and host for Stories in a Cemetery. You can find all my fiction works with themes of the afterlife on nicholasmcgurr.com. That's NicholasMcGirr.com. As a writer, I do research, and that research is more than likely inside a haunted location or a cemetery. Like you, I'm curious about the afterlife, and always looking for a new topic for my next book. I hope you enjoy this episode of my research as much as I did in using it for my fiction works. Let's get into today's story in the cemetery. Hey guys, welcome to episode 38 of Stories in a Cemetery, and I wanted to thank you all for listening in to last week's Flight 93 memorial for the attacks on 9/11 episode. I know it was a little longer than normal, but I felt like it was necessary to commemorate those folks that we lost from those attacks, and the very brave folks from Flight 93. So, going into a couple of show notes, tours have been super busy for me, both with customers and activity, and if you're ever in the Charleston, South Carolina area, I'm going to urge you to take the Stories in a Cemetery interactive ghost hunting experience, where my guests actually get to use my tools. So we're talking about thermal imaging cameras, laser grids, spirit boxes, the whole nine yards. It's not your normal ghost walk. We actually will go ghost hunting on the streets of downtown Charleston. So again, follow up with the Facebook Stories in a Cemetery page to kind of see those live updates that I put up there on the availability from week to week. So it does change. I do get cancellations, and I'll make announcements. Moving right on into the secret updates. I know some of you only listen for these quick snippets of these secret updates. It's not really part of my paranormal branding that I go into, so I'll make this very, very brief and quick. My contact for going to my dig site to dig up Byron Price's cask from the Secret of here in Charleston, he's recently gone under some surgery. We're waiting for him to obviously recover before we will actually put a shovel to the ground. This has been a very, very, very long process, and thank you COVID and protests and riots and for everything else getting kind of in our way of digging up this cask. But if you've been listening and following along, you know that I am already working on a book to tell of my journey and how I came about the secret, how I went about figuring out the clues to get everything to match up the way I needed to. And again, we are looking to probe first. We will be using a gyroscope. I'm not even sure that's the right term. It's a camera on the end of a cable, and then we have a screen on ground. So we'll be shoving the camera down into the ground, and hopefully we will be seeing that cask. So stay tuned. Hopefully that's all coming very, very soon. I'm just as anxious as the rest of you to see this Charleston cask being pulled out of the ground. I know it's a very big deal, at least for me anyway. Today we're going to be talking about the Jennie Wade house in Gettysburg. I did visit there in mid-August, so the Jennie Wade house, I was there August 19th, but I took a vacation where it entailed a bunch of haunted locations, including the Flight 93 memorial that you heard last week, and this week we're going to be talking about the Jennie Wade house. So let's get right into the history of Jennie Wade and kind of what this is all about. So first off, Jennie Wade was the only civilian that was killed during the Battle of Gettysburg. So there's one super interesting fact if you didn't already know that. And there's been a lot of research that went into this, and of course in the show notes I do list all of the resources and references that I used in order to validate some of the evidence that I did find. But I do want to start with, I read, the biggest reference I had was a book that I read, of course, and I purchased it right there in the museum gift shop. It was Jennie Wade of Gettysburg. I sat down and read it cover to cover, and was able to validate quite a few things just by reading this book. So if you're planning on going to visit, it is a very short read. It's about 100 pages or so. Definitely give it a read before you walk into this. Normally when I go into an investigation, I don't like to have my pre-suggested thoughts, and a lot of the investigations that I watched about the Jennie Wade house, it seems like they already knew the history. They already had a lot of preemptive words or sayings that they were looking for. With that being said, I always try to do the investigation and then go into the actual research to validate it. and that's just part of my method. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with these other folks' method, but that's just kind of how I do it. I want validation and proof, which is what I'm sure you're after. So let's start with Jennie's name first off. It was Jennie. So it originally started with her name, her middle name, which is Virginia, and then it turned into Jennie with a G, and then it just changed into Jennie, as in Jennie. With all of that said, I did make a note on the blog post, and there's plenty of resources on the blog post, guys. As always, I'm going to refer you over to nicholasmcgurr.com to check out all the extras and the bonuses and to see the lists. Now that I have extra tools and gadgets in my paranormal toolkit, I'm providing all of that back to you the same way I do for my guests on my tours. But anyway, Jennie's name really shows a little bit more of her personality than what I was actually expecting. So once I started diving into this, it was kind of like, all right, that kind of makes sense of why they started calling her Jennie. She was a very, kind-hearted person. She was helping the Union soldiers. She was baking bread for them. She was giving them pails of water. She just had a big heart for these folks, and she could have ignored all of the door knocking from the soldiers. I mean, I'm sure they went knocking on a lot of doors throughout the city of Gettysburg, and she could have ignored it and just protected her family and did what she had to do. But she didn't. She was actually baking bread for them, preparing yeast. If, she didn't have any bread left and somebody came knocking, she told them when they can come back. So that was a pretty big deal. That speaks a lot for her personality. I'm not here just to kind of, just praise what the poor girl did. It's all about her story and just what kind of person she really was. That's just how big of a heart that she actually had, and it was a risk to take some pails of water out to the soldiers that were out on the lawns, just kind of waiting. So that's a pretty big deal. That's a brave thing she did, to go outside of her home to actually help these soldiers out. A couple of interesting things about all of this is walking into the Jennie Wade house. I didn't really fully get that this was her sister's house at first. So this was not her home. Her sister, Georgia, recently had a baby just a few days prior, and their mother was already there kind of helping with the baby and, of course, a newborn. And Jennie gathered up her brothers and headed over to her sister's house in order to stay safe once the battling actually began. And that's where she was, baking the bread and getting the water from and all of those things. And the sister was in a bed downstairs. This was a 2-story home. With a basement. So kind of put that in the back of your head. We're going to talk about the structure of this home here in just a minute. But she was in the kitchen, and a Confederate soldier missed his mark, and his shot went through 2 doors and landed in Jennie's back, struck her heart, and killed her instantly. Family was all in the house. They were all somewhat witness to this. But the day before, there was an interesting, I guess happenstance is the right word I'm looking for here. There was a giant artillery shell. I don't even say giant. An artillery shell that actually passed through the roof of their home. And their house was a duplex. So one family lived on one side, which would have been her sister George's family. And then there was another family on the other side called the McLeans. The artillery shell went through the roof and split one of the bedroom walls upstairs. It didn't split it completely for somebody to walk through. That was done later by some Union soldiers that were helping the Wade family. After Jennie was shot, Union soldiers came inside, helping to defend the house, and they wanted to move the remainder of the family to a safer place. But they weren't going without Jennie. So they actually wrapped her up in a rug, and they carried her upstairs. They went through the hole in the wall where the artillery shell hit. It had to be widened and broadened by the Union soldiers, so they used like the butt of their guns to make the wall wide enough for the family to go through. They go over to the McLean side of the duplex, go down the stairs, then outside to the basement door, and hid down there with Jennie's body until the battle was over. That's a lot to go through. To obviously make sure like your family is safe, and they weren't going without Jennie, which speaks a lot of volumes about the kind of family that Jennie came from. There's a lot of details that go into Jennie's story. There was a lot that came out of those 100-plus pages that I read, all of the stories I read online. There was an alleged lover slash fiance and a message that was never delivered to Jennie. I didn't go into the details of all of this and all of the contacts that she had and friends in Gettysburg because I didn't find any actual relation in my investigation. I'm not saying that it's insignificant. What I am saying is that I'm giving you my investigation and the clues that kind of went into that. I'm very impressed with what the Wade family did for Jennie's body. I'm also very impressed with the actions of Jennie. I'm a person that looks at somebody's actions versus what they say. The actions of her supporting the Union soldiers and feeding them, making sure they had water, that's a pretty big deal in times of war. Imagine if your city was under siege. What would you be doing? So before we get into my full investigation and some of the other investigations that have been done on the Jennie Wade house, I did find a YouTube video that I'm going to play for you guys. And again, tons of investigations have been done on the Jennie Wade house, and I know some of you aren't exactly fans of Zach Bagans, but he did interview Joe Svella. He's the manager of the Jennie Wade house, and he kind of goes through a quick recap that will shorten up the story for you. And if my confusion of the way the house is structured and laid out confused you a little bit, that's perfectly fine. You actually need to go visit this place to kind of see it anyway. So let's take a listen to Joe and his story.
Right now we're at the Jennie Wade house. Now this is going to be the second part of our 3-part lockdown. This place has some really tragic history involving, actually, was it the first Civil War casualty of a civilian?
Well, it was the only civilian here in Gettysburg, the only one throughout the battle, yes.
And she perished through this.
She died instantly inside this building. This is Jennie's sister's house. Jennie Wade did not live here. She gave birth to a baby here 4 days before the battle.
Who did? Her sister?
Jennie's sister did. So the mother was here helping with the baby. Jennie's downtown taking care of the brothers. The battle's going on north and west of town, so ironically, she wanted to get away from the battle. She packed up the boys, brought them here. An hour later, the Union Army's defeated north of town. They retreat to the high ground 200 yards on the other side of the building. So now this building's sitting right in the middle of the fight.
In the middle of nowhere.
Right. About 8 o'clock in the morning, the action outside had died down. Jennie thought it might be a good chance to go to the kitchen and make some breakfast for the family. She left the parlor door in this position so that she would be behind 2 doors.
So she would
just
be
for
safe.
Safety. The Union Army, they positioned themselves right on the other side of the building. They're coming around the sides. Some Union soldier probably ran by the front of the building. Some Confederate, a block and a half from here, took a pot shot and missed, and the bullet went right through the door right here.
That's the actual hole.
That's the hole.
So this is the actual bullet hole of the bullet that killed Jennie Wade.
Yes, it is. After Jennie died, some Union soldiers came in. They knew they had to get the family out of here. They couldn't go out this door because Confederates were right down the street.
Okay.
So what they did was they took the family to the 2nd floor. When we get up there, you're going to find that this building is 2 separate homes. An artillery shell had gone through the roof of the house, came across, hit the solid brick wall, made a hole, like I said, about this big. And here's these soldiers, Union soldiers, they're beating on the bricks with the butt ends of the muskets, trying to make the hole big enough.
To get safety to get on the other side of the wall?
Right.
Once through the wall, the Union soldiers carried Jennie's lifeless corpse down the neighbor's stairs and into the basement.
Yeah, the soldiers came down here, they cleared off the bench in the corner, placed Jennie's body where we had that display.
Welcome back, guys, and thanks so much for allowing me to put sponsors in the middle of the show. It definitely moves things along for Stories in a Cemetery. So now that we heard Joe's version of Jennie's tale and a little bit about the history of what happened to her, I do want to talk about some of the other investigations that have gone on. And I did review quite a bit of YouTube videos, and it seems to be the way everybody does their investigations, and they kind of just post it on YouTube and bring everybody live to their show or what have you. I really wasn't too impressed. First, most people already knew the story going in. I didn't know much, so I feel like I have a little bit more valid proof. But the popularity of the Jennie Wade House has actually brought quite a few of the television shows to the Jennie Wade House for an investigation, including Ghost Adventures, obviously, since y'all just heard a clip from Zach Bagans interviewing the manager, and Ghost Labs that I know of. So again, pretty popular area, and when I went into this, I do want to talk a little bit about my investigation, and there have been different ways that I've been going about things. So I have a lot more tools in my paranormal toolkit, as I've mentioned to you, or if you've been following along, I've been adding a lot of different gadgets to my tours. So first and foremost, I did have a thermal imaging video camera set up the exact same way as I did at the Flight 93 Memorial in my cargo pocket, with just the camera sticking out of the top of the pocket. However, that video is lost. I have no idea what happened to it. I know I watched part of it on the way back from Gettysburg, and now it is completely gone. I have no idea what happened, and I was super excited because I actually have a cold figure in that video where they're kind of crouching down. It was a very cool catch, and I should have screenshotted things while I was on my way back from Gettysburg. I wasn't driving, so I was able to review some of the video. However, it's gone, so I have no valid proof of that. I did have the S-Box Ghost Scanner by Ghost Stop turned down on mute in my pocket to review later, and the audio I got was approximately 26 minutes long, and the full list of the words that I got is actually posted on the blog. And I did have an EMF meter, a K2, when I was touring the home where Jennie Wade was shot, so I did get some spikes. I'll talk about that. But I do want to talk about some of the other claims that are there other than my own investigations. So claims of orbs floating, and I did see some of those videos myself. They were very active and moving in different directions. People getting touched, their hair flipped, and things like that. Nothing like that actually happened to me. And, of course, countless EVPs, which is very top-notch for pretty much claiming a place to be paranormal, especially when your EVPs, electronic voice phenomenon, are intelligent. I do want to play another clip from Joe, and this was the manager of the Jennie Wade House, and it's his story of when he was giving one of his tours. So let's listen to Joe one more time.
A lot of times people ask me, have I ever seen a ghost? And up to a few years ago, I always had to say no. I had experienced ghosts many, many times. I did see a rocking chair rock with no one in it. I saw doors open and close. I've heard footsteps. I've heard voices. I've felt cold spots. But I had never seen a ghost until one day I was doing a history tour with a group of school kids over in the Jennie Wade house. Jennie Wade, the only civilian to die during the battle, had been aiding the Union soldiers when a bullet went through two doors, penetrated her heart, came out the front of her body, killed her instantly. A very tragic death. And that sort of tragedy can cause a haunting. One day I was doing a history tour, middle of the day. We went upstairs, took the kids through the bedrooms, and as we started down the stairs, there on the landing, we saw a little boy. He had on a white shirt, 3/4 length pants, suspenders. He slowly turned, he looked up at us, we made eye contact, and just like that, he was gone. Some of those kids made their way right back up to the second floor and didn't want to go down, and if we hadn't forced them to, they may still be up there today.
Alright, so obviously there's been lots of accounts of what's been happening here at the Jennie Wade House. And again, just to recap, the equipment, instruments that I was using, the thermal imaging camera outside my cargo pocket, the S-Box Ghost Scanner by Ghost Stop. It was on mute, so I can actually enjoy and see things inside the museum. and listen to the people I was with. I did use the K2 EMF meter, which was, I had it out from time to time, and then I did use the digital spirit box on my cell phone. Again, I was being discreet, allowing the folks that I was with to actually enjoy the museum as well, and this way it wasn't all about my ghost hunt and what I was actually after. So keep in mind that the thermal imaging video that I did have, the file is lost, and therefore I am not going to put that in my validations because I can't prove it. So that's what this is about, guys. I'm here to prove certain places are haunted and have paranormal activity and so forth and so on. So let's talk about the S-Box Ghost Scanner and the file that I found there. I found tons of words that came through, and again, go back to episode 36 and kind of review how I use this, but I will listen for any radio DJs, commercials, song lyrics, and or disembodied voices. I do want to talk about two in particular that showed up because it kind of proves, along with the random paranormal activity that happens here, kind of like Joe's story, and you don't really hear a story like that from anybody else. I did have the word Nancy and the word Central come up. Now, you're kind of thinking, like, what does that mean? And I usually dive into names pretty heavily just to make sure it's going to relate to the property and or the story that's actually at hand. So Nancy Weikart ran a boarding house that was in the heart of downtown Gettysburg. So you can say that the heart was in the center of downtown Gettysburg. So Nancy and Central definitely, in my eyes, go together, especially since they were really close together. I did find an article that talked about Nancy Weikart. It's called Remembering Gettysburg, and of course the link will be in your show notes. And what happened there was another civilian that was shot and wounded and ended up on Nancy's porch. So even though it wasn't a tragedy, considering, you know, Jennie was the only tragedy, the only death, civilian death, that happened out of the Battle of Gettysburg, this was pretty substantial. And he just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, and his leg was shot. And it was at Nancy's doorstep, if I read the story properly, where he was actually bandaged up. So I don't know that the Wade family knew of this, or if they're obviously past anybody from the Gettysburg time period, and if they just wanted to kind of come through. But it just kind of goes to show what happens at Gettysburg is completely random. I watched several of those YouTube videos, like I said before, that random spirits or random soldiers would come through just to want to say a few things through the spirit box or through their K2 meters. So I found it very interesting that the name Nancy and the word Central came up. And the other stuff was actually, you know, I found it significant. Like 23 seconds in, I got the words as a phrase, killed me. And obviously that was relatable to what happened to Jennie Wade. I did have two disembodied voices at 2 minutes and 10 seconds and 2 minutes and 13 seconds, only 3 seconds apart. The next thing I noticed, and this was kind of odd too, was I want as one phrase, and then to talk to your kids as another phrase. So it's almost as if it's a full sentence, and they are again 3 seconds apart. I want to talk to your kids. The words, the phrase, the nation came up. The phrase, open one. Who is that? At 17 minutes and 22 seconds, I did hear some odd sounds that, I mean, you have to remember, I listen to a spirit box pretty much on a daily basis as I review my tours from the night prior. I don't always listen to their full 90 to 2 hour spirit box session, but I do go to the hot spots and the timestamps that were hot for other activity. So I kind of know the sounds that are going to come through any type of spirit box, and at 17 minutes and 22 seconds, it was pretty odd. And then about 5 minutes later, 22 minutes and 42 seconds, I heard, I hear you. So, cool thing about what I'm doing now with these investigations is I'm giving you the entire spirit box audio file to listen for yourself and the markers. So head over to nicholasmcgurr.com or go to the show notes. You'll see a link that'll take you directly to the blog post for this Jennie Wade investigation, and kind of, you know, you can look through all of these yourself. From the digital spirit box, I got the word children pretty much right off the top. So it's another reference to kids, just kind of like at the S-Box from Ghost Stop Above that I mentioned before. I got the word asleep, and I noticed this when I was near there was a bed in the McLean bedroom, upstairs bedroom. So we were partially through the house, making our way through, and I got the word asleep, but I also had a pretty high EMF spike while I was there. I got the phrase "let me out," and that was when I was somewhat near the opening in the wall that I told you guys about earlier. Political and celebration, which I can look at as a phrase describing the battle. And then I got the word hair, which, again, didn't make sense at the time, but as I started diving into some of the accounts and the paranormal activity that happens at the Jennie Wade house, they say that there are hair tugs on some of the guests that walk through there. So guys, know that moving forward, I'm going to give you the entire word list of everything that I find, as far as the Spirit Box audio, as well as the digital Spirit Box word list. So I plan on posting those for you along with pictures. There are some really great pictures that April took while we were there. I was really highly impressed with the museum and how they preserved a lot of things. There was a lot of artifacts there, and hopefully I can continue doing other places like this kind of discreetly, where I can just slide some of these gadgets in my pocket, let them run, enjoy the museum, and review it all later, and not have if you're a paranormal investigator, a bunch of people staring at you, as you're waving around a blinky blinky light, and people are wondering what the heck you're doing. So again, I'm doing these investigations very similar to the way I do my tours. I'm giving you all of the data. You just have to go to the blog post and check it out. When you're coming on an investigation with me, you're getting one of these gadgets. This tour is actually set up for 10 people. I have another gadget coming. It should be here sometime this week, and I will be doing a review on it and kind of showing you how I will use it and the things that I'll be learning about it. I still need to do a full review and an episode on the FLIR thermal imaging camera. I'll be honest with you guys, I'm still learning quite a bit about this gadget. I'm actually going to test something new tonight with it and kind of see how that works. And my folks on my tours, they get that video back. So with all of that being said, guys, please check out the blog post. There's tons of information there, some videos for you guys to watch. I did put up all of the evidence that I collected while I was there. And of course, with the K2 meter, you're just going to have to kind of take my word for it, because I didn't take any pictures of it, nor is there any video from the thermal imaging camera. Hopefully in the future, there will not be any mishaps. Kind of like I've had 2 mishaps when I was in Pennsylvania. If you remember from the Flight 93 memorial, I did lose the digital Spirit Box word list, and with this case, I lost the thermal imaging video. So again, these are kind of flukes. This isn't something that normally happens to me, especially with my regular tours that I do nightly for my folks here in Charleston. But anyway, check out the Facebook page for Stories in a Cemetery. Leave me all kinds of comments. Make sure you follow the blog. And as always, I'm going to ask that you go over to your favorite podcatcher and leave a review for Stories in a Cemetery. It's only going to bring more people to the podcast, keep this moving along, and that way we can actually grow. So if you've already taken a tour with me, thank you so very much. And you've already left me a review, I'm sure, for the tours, because they have been pouring in over these past couple of weeks since I got back from Pennsylvania. And I want to thank all of my guests for my tours. You guys have been great. And please share how thorough of an investigation we actually go through, even just walking through the streets of Charleston on the Facebook page. So anyway, guys, until next time, this has been your Stories in a Cemetery for this week. I am going to deem the Jennie Wade house definitely haunted based on the activity that I've already obtained. Hopefully I get to go back sometime in the future, but with the hundreds of haunted locations across the United States, I'm sure I will be at other locations before I go back. Until then, I'll talk to you guys next time. Thanks. Thanks so much for listening to today's Story in a Cemetery. Be sure to check out the show notes with pictures and bonus audio sections on nicholasmcgurr.com. As you know, I'm a writer, and now you have another story that inspires me to write my fiction works. Be sure to share this episode on your social media or leave me comments on the Stories in a Cemetery Facebook page. I'll see you next time with another Story in the Cemetery.